Gary DePaul with Unlabeled Leadership. Welcome to episode 87, Ed Gash on Gratitude for Feedback. Here's a shout out to listeners in Ulster, Ireland, and in the Philippines, Calabarzon, in the United States, South Carolina, Chapin, Lancaster, Somerville, and Westminster. With that, let's get started. Ed Gash knows leadership. As a certified coach and instructor, Ed has been helping thousands of people develop how they lead and helping them become more effective in their organizations. Ed is an author, and he's the Chief Pathlighter and Guardian of EMG Mourning Path, LLC. EMG stands for Edward Mason Gash, which is Ed's son who recently passed away. The organization works to strengthen young people's sense of self, and Ed works with students in grades 6 to 12 and college freshmen. If you look at Ed's profile, you'll find several recommendations and testimonials, including the following one. Let me read it to you. Ed was a great partner for our leadership program. In and out of the classroom, you could always count on him to challenge and inspire participants. With his colorful stories and wonderful sense of humor, his classes were always full of energy. Ed will always shine, whether he's an internal or external consultant. Part 1. Letting Go of Old Ways. In my book, 9 Practices of 21st Century Leadership, I write about 7 leadership principles. One of them is connecting with others. This principle involves allowing yourself to be vulnerable to other people and also to be receptive of feedback. In this part, Ed is going to share some stories. Before he does, he wants to share a phrase which has been highly meaningful for him. Here's Ed to explain.
25 years ago, I was in a men's group, and we were being led by our associate rector at the time, and he brought up a term called metanoia. And metanoia is Greek for to surrender to a radical change of heart. Metanoia, to surrender to a radical change of heart. I said, okay. If you write that sentence down, Gary, you take a look at some of those words, to surrender to a radical change of heart. Any words in that definition that immediately jump out at you, Gary? I'll just pretend like you're in a class.
Oh, yeah. Surrender is the first thing that stands out for me.
Okay, well, let's take a look at surrender. When you hear the word surrender, what comes to mind?
For me, it seems like it's giving up something like part of your, if I could use the word ego, or giving up on some defensive mechanisms.
Yeah, that's a very mature one. Usually, a lot of people say, well, it's giving up versus giving in, and it's really letting go so that doesn't hold you hostage anymore. I'm surrendering. It's almost a theological term. I'm surrendering. I am forgiving you, or I'm letting go because I'm not going to let your thing hold me hostage in your absence. It's letting go. You're one of the ones that answer it pretty close to right. So
I like the letting go. That really, I think that you're right. That captures it.
Yeah, letting go. It's no longer holding me hostage. I'm no longer angry at the person. I'm not going to let it anger me. It's like drinking a cup of poison, hoping the other person dies. So it's really doing that. What other words jumped out at you, Gary? To surrender to a radical change of heart.
Radical change, those 2 words.
Yeah. Well, let's take the word radical. Now, when you hear the word radical, what comes to mind?
It's something that is substantially different from what you're currently used to. And a lot of times that could be outside of your comfort zone.
You're on it. You're a model student right now, so you're getting an A so far. But radical, people think extreme. Back at, we're old enough to remember the 60s, the hippies, radicals, terrorists, whatever, radicals. Radical comes from the root word radii, to radiate a deeper meaning. To radiate a deeper meaning. You've already got surrender and radiate going for you. And then we got this thing called change, which, as you and I both know, the only thing that's consistent is things are consistently changing. In order to change, we have to really let go of some of our old ways of thinking and surrender in our heart, embedded in our heart. Pretty sure you probably underline heart, because that's what leadership is about. It's about the latent leadership within. I think leadership is a ministry, Gary, and people don't aren't crazy about leading and growing people, get the heck out of leadership, do a management job or do a things job. But we all have this latent leadership inside that was put here at birth almost for us to kind of uncover and peel back the onion of the radical change. So it's sort of like peeling back the onion of onion skins into what are you really here for?
When you say leadership is a ministry, that just got me thinking about what ministry means. So what does ministry mean for you, and how does that relate to leadership?
Ministry is a calling. Ministry is a vocation or avocation. It's not an occupation. But a lot of us define ourselves by our occupation that just merely occupies our time. So we can look at our job and our life as an occupation, or we can look at it as a vocation or avocation or as a ministry. Funny story. I was back in the Jesus movement of the 70s. Everybody's talking about the Jesus movement. I was back then, and I thought I'd been called to the priesthood.
Ah.
My mother said, well, I want you to go visit the bishop of Western North Carolina. So I went to the bishop. He had the grace and firm and fairness to say, this wasn't a call to the ministry, but let me tell you about the big P and the little p and the big M and the little m. We're all ministers. And he was right. Yeah. My ministry has been 4 decades of leadership development. I'm still learning at 69. So that's what I get really on fire about, that we are all called to have metanoic experiences and try to help others have their own metanoic experience.
Part 2, feedback when you care. For a lot of people, feedback is something that doesn't come natural. It's a skill that should be developed over time. A related skill is the ability to receive feedback, which sometimes is very difficult to accept. Ed shares some stories related to feedback. Here's Ed.
I was working in an organization for 4 years that was very toxic. Feedback was given negatively motivated. It was designed to cut your legs out from under you. It was very hierarchical. I was told to change the performance appraisals so it would fit in a bell-shaped curve. And I said, that's it. I finally landed a job with a wonderful Fortune 50 company with a wonderful culture and a wonderful manager. She and I were the opposite. We complemented each other well. And I think that's why she hired me, because that which I think I'll give grace to her. But the first time she gave me critical feedback, how do you think I react based on my previous background?
I can visualize you crossing your arms, your eyes get narrower, and you don't take it the way that it was intended.
You were there.
I may have been there, actually.
But yeah, her name was Joan, and she's now a master certified coach. She's awesome. She said, Ed, I have a dream of a goal of you becoming the best trainer on the floor here, of you winning trainer of the year. I have a dream of you winning international facilitator of the year, but I can't help you get there if you're not open to my feedback. And if you're not open to my feedback, nor do I want to help you. Bam, bam. That hit me. She shared because she cared instead of glossing over. I've had the fortune to be mentored under the late, great Stephen R. Covey and Ken Blanchard. And Ken Blanchard's got a great story. You know how to tell the difference between a principle-centered leader and an ego or insecure-centered leader? Give them critical feedback and see what they do with it.
Ah.
Our ego center, which is, he used the acronym edging God out, will get obviously defensive, like you described me, beautifully, Gary. But a principle centered person will say, yeah, well, thank you. What else do I have? And one time I was teaching a class, a funny story I'll tell. I was teaching a class one time, and we got to about the first hour of kind of lecture and discussion, whatever. And I sat down to watch the video and looked down, and my fly had been open the first hour of class.
Oh, no.
And nobody said a damn thing. So I zipped up. I got up and said, class, before we debrief the video, I'd like to ask you a simple question. How many of you realized my fly was open? Everybody raised their hand.
Oh, my goodness.
Why didn't one of you have the courtesy and compassion to come tell me my fly was open? Oh, we didn't want to embarrass you. and that's much less embarrassing 2 hours in front instead of 2 minutes. Somebody. See, there's a difference between being nice and being kind. And that's where I go back to, as a Brown saying, being vulnerable, being nice and being kind. They were being nice because they could have come up with a break, hey, giggle. I'm sorry, Ed. I hate to tell you this, but your fly's been open. So a kind person would have just scribbled the word zipper probably and just come up to my desk and slide it on. That's being kind. Being kind is being kind to people even when they're not kind to you, and you want to be in the react mode. That's hard. And I think if there's any call to kindness right now is in this time of uncertainty, we've got to go back to being kind and strong at the same time. That one just really resonated with me. So if you create a culture of feedback, which I wrote a little book on culture, but obviously what a bestseller, but I'm infatuated with culture because your culture is being established with or without your knowledge.
True.
Or design or default. And if it's by default, you end up with the first four letters. It's cult, and the inmates are running the asylum. But if you're being intentional about it, it's culture, and it's shaping your culture. And culture is simply the way we live life every day. Is it a fear-based culture or is it a value-based culture? So I get all wrapped up because I've been a product of 2 or 3 downsizes because the culture wasn't there to sustain a pure leadership model. It wasn't a part of their process. You and I can go teach the best leadership classes in the world, but if the culture's not there to sustain it, what difference does it make? And I take that to our own personal culture. So that's what really resonated with me.
You said a lot in those few sentences. And when I'm going back to nice and kind, the difference, I was thinking back to part 1 where you're talking about feedback. And in this case, with Joan giving you feedback, it was done out of kindness, but with a positive intent versus a manager who notices something about a person and wants to give feedback, but do it in a way that's nice, but not impactful.
And that keys up another story that was second place. Thank you for throwing that transition, because even with all this knowledge, I was at another place where an entire class sent a poison pen letter anonymously to the COO about my week-long boot camp. The first 2 boot camps I did were great, but the third one just found out later that most of those were sent there as prisoners, so they didn't want to be there. I could tell something was wrong. And then my manager comes in and he shares this with me, and it was a character assassination.
Wow.
I used to say, I can handle constructive feedback as delivered. So, well, that ain't always going to happen. He had the kindness but strength to say, let's treat this as a gift. And go back and look at every part of your week-long boot camp. Okay. They complained about this. So I stripped the whole curriculum down, Gary, and every hour and 15 minutes, we were doing something different. We were doing project management or we were doing case work, and the week flew. In reflection, and my arrogance, who are they to tell me what to do? But if it hadn't been so brutal, I might not have taken it so seriously. If I hadn't had Mike was his name. But the bottom line is the principle that Ken talks about is the principle of acceptance. So if you can create a culture of coaching and feedback, your trust is going to go high. And when your trust is high, your production is high, your morale is high, and all that stuff. So it's organic, and there's no set static business model for it. It's fluid, and to me, it's day-to-day coaching and feedback that makes or breaks a culture.
And when you have a culture like you just described, that kind of a culture where there's trust is one that can sustain leadership and I think opportunities for leadership. I never thought about a culture as sustaining things like leadership.
The law of the farm, you're growing your leaders from within. A good culture is manifesting future leaders versus, we'll have to go outside for that. Boy, that just makes me want to hurl. Why do you have to go outside? Why aren't you growing a crop? It's another exercise I do that shows the difference between leadership and management. I split the class up in half, and half of them go off and they chart. I sort of manipulate. We go huddle over there. I want you guys to chart the steps it takes to change a tire. Okay. Calling AAA is not an option. And then I go over to the other side. You guys, I want you to brainstorm all the ingredients it takes to grow world-class tomatoes. Those big beefsteak tomatoes we eat in the summer, and they're juicy and whatever. Mm-hmm. And then I go back and we debrief. And I said, each one shares their different. You can imagine what the tire change is. I sequenced it. Pull off the side of the road, pull out the truck, yada, yada, yada. So the brainstorm list, you can imagine, looks completely different. Well, get good seed, till the soil, fertilize, all that stuff, and stakes in the ground. And boy, you could spend a whole day. So what I do is This is a perfect example why we shouldn't use leadership and management as one term, because we here suggest that you manage things and you lead and grow people. So managing things would be changing tires. Growing people would be growing tomatoes. So can you put life in a seed? No, it's already there. Can you take life out of a seed? Yeah. By what? Well, not water, or by using a tire tool.
That would do it.
Because that's industrial age management, the carrot and stick mentality. And unfortunately, there's still some of those around, and they're manifesting to other tire changers. Now, there's a lot of good tire changers out there that are charged with doing a lot better job of leadership. And right now, we've got a lot of dead tomatoes. So also, you know what you have to do with the tomato trees? You have to pinch off the suckers. The ones that are non-fruit building, you have to pinch them off. And my experience is we got a lot of people, a lot of suckers still employed for some reason. A body is better than something. Well, there goes your culture. If you are judged by how you handle crisis, who are you getting away with the lowest performer? That's how you're judged as a leader, those two things.
Part 3, listen with your eyes. One challenge in corporate America is the ability to treat your employees as humans, as people. There's been a lot of work done in this area and a lot of investment and research around something called the employee experience. Ed advises us not about how we treat other employees, but he advises us about how we treat ourselves. Again, here's Ed.
My advice is be kind to yourself, because I didn't realize how much self-talk I was destroying myself with, even teaching leadership through all these years, until tragedies of 3 years ago kind of strips you back to the rawness. And I feel like I've done more self-analysis and self-growth. To just be kind to yourself. Are you caught up in very mindful moments, or you just doing mindless tasks? Focus on the moment. Focus, because you're the manager of the moment. You are the master of the moment, or you're a disaster of the moment. And are you just kind of going through life, just picking it apart and all that? My son taught me one time I'd come home late from practice and family meal had already taken place. So I was getting myself something to eat. And then he was telling about his day in preschool. All of a sudden, he just quit talking. And I said, "Go ahead, Mason. I'm listening." He said, "No, Daddy, you're not listening with your eyes. I'm the one with a degree in guidance and counseling, and I am humbled by this then elementary school." I sat down because the most important thing to me at that time. My advice is to start listening with your eyes and then do the 12-inch drop and listen with your heart. What's their story? Listen with a curious mind. You know, we can talk about empathic listening, what it is, and just hear their story. Everybody's got a story. And we start learning each other's story. What do you think that'll do to the trust? What do you think that'll do to the morale? Because everybody's got a story. I just think it's past time for us to be sharing stories, and so it's story time.
It's amazing how something so simple of sharing our stories bonds and helps people to work together more effectively versus the misbelief that you need to keep your personal life personal and not share anything outside of work.
Last time I checked, we were human beings before we were human employees, and you get the whole self when it comes to work. And unfortunately, our families sometimes get the whole work coming home. It's both ways. And to be able to, so if somebody says, "Well, I act one way in public, one way at work or private or whatever," this just kicks the authentic leader in the teeth there. So it doesn't have to be that way, because that's a fear-based culture. And it's kiss, kill. Keep it simple and short. Keep it long lasting. That's what the power of a story is. Because people, I think you've done research, Gary, that people remember story and what it was like to be with you much longer than they remember what you said.
My thanks to Ed Gash. If you'd like to learn more about Ed, go to the show notes. And if you have a comment or question, go to unlabelleadership.com, click the message icon, and you can leave a voicemail message for up to 1 minute. I'd like to thank those who contribute to the show. Your contributions make a difference because this is an all-volunteer service. Mostly, though, I'd like to thank you for listening. Until next time, lead on.